Hi everyone, my name is Jade Calver. I own and operate Calver and Associates Canadian Immigration Services. Today we're going to talk about family sponsorship, including who can I sponsor. So lots of people, they call and they want to sponsor a family member, be it a niece, a nephew, a spouse, and you can't actually sponsor any family member. They have to fall within specific categories of family sponsorship in Canada. So today I'm going to talk about who you can sponsor as a sponsor. So first are spouses, common law partners, and conjugal partners. So there are key differences between the three. The first are spouses, so that's a wife or husband. So this means you need to be legally married to the person. You can have been married either in Canada or outside of Canada, but if you're married outside of Canada, the marriage must also be considered legal in Canada. So this is important in the cases of same-sex marriages. So were you married in another country where it's not legal? Or, for example, were you married in Canada or outside of Canada, but you weren't you hadn't actually finalized a divorce on another marriage, and so that means that your current marriage isn't legal. So you can sponsor a person who you're married to. The next person that you can sponsor is a common law partner. So common law for the purpose of immigration purposes is 12 consecutive months of cohabitation. So in order to sponsor a common law partner, and in order for them to be considered your common law partner, you have to prove that you were living together for 12 consecutive months. So it's very important in an application that you show that you are living together for these 12 months, and we do that through leases, utility bills, etc. It's important to note too that once you establish common law status, so if you established common law status 2 years ago, and then after that you weren't living together, you're still actually considered common law. It doesn't end after the initial 12-month period of cohabitation. And lastly, in terms of a partner, there is a conjugal partner. So this is where people often confuse this with common law partner, I find. They'll call me and say that they want to sponsor someone under the conjugal partner class, thinking that they can sponsor someone with whom they're in a relationship with whom they haven't lived for those 12 consecutive months. And that's not really how it works. Conjugal partners, if you look at the legal definition, it's really someone who there's some sort of impediment that's prohibiting you from living together. So, for example, if neither of you can get visas to the other person's country, or if you're in a same-sex relationship where you can't get married or live together, then you would qualify under the conjugal partners class. It's really rare that someone qualifies under this class of application. Next are our parents and grandparents. So people under the parents and grandparents class, so you can sponsor your biological parent or grandparent. It's also important to note that they really want to see that they're your biological parent or that the parent adopted you. So that means that you can't sponsor a step-parent. So that's important to note. Lots of people confuse that parent with a parent or a step-parent. The other people that can be sponsored are other relatives. So as I said earlier, people call and they want to sponsor a niece or a nephew, for example. So in terms of other relatives, Immigration Canada there are only two options under this class. So the first option are someone who is orphaned, and so it's important to know that this person must be under 18 and they must have some sort of biological relationship to you. So your niece, for example, if your niece had been orphaned, so that means both her biological parents had died, then you would be able to sponsor her. So it's really important that there are specific criteria that this person be under 18 and orphaned and related to you in specific ways. I won't get into those today, but they're very, the constraints of that definition are fairly strict. And second, so there's another option for other relatives. And so lots of people, they get confused with this one as well. And so they think that they can just sponsor another relative if they live outside of Canada. But in fact, it needs to be, I often refer to this class as the Lonely Canadian class. So that means that you, as the Canadian sponsor, you don't have any blood relatives in Canada, and the other person outside of Canada, it means that you don't have anyone outside of Canada that you would be able to sponsor either. And so it means that it's really to reunite people in a family where you're the only two left, kind of thing. So you would submit an application to sponsor that person. That pretty much covers all of the family class sponsorship cases classes of people who can be sponsored. As you can see, this really omits a lot of people, so nieces, nephews, uncles, aunts. So what we do, and what's often not talked about, and Immigration Canada obviously doesn't talk about this, there's also, you can use a clause in the Immigration Act, Section 25, which is the Humanitarian and Compassionate Considerations class. And so when someone doesn't qualify under the existing programs, we often, so say for an aunt or an uncle or a niece or a nephew, so what we would do is essentially argue under the Humanitarian and Compassionate Considerations class that you, as the Canadian sponsor, you actually have a parent-like relationship with your aunt or uncle, perhaps because your parents have passed away, or that you have a child-parent-like relationship with a niece or a nephew. And then in that case, we would submit an application arguing that a humanitarian and compassionate consideration. And so that's how we sponsor people who are not, those who aren't prescribed under the constraints of the family class. Other than that, if we can't argue any of an agency consideration, and if a family member doesn't fit into one of the prescribed family class categories, then we look to other ways to bring them to Canada, so on a temporary basis or through other permanent residency programs. So that pretty much covers today's video on the family class and who you can sponsor. For more information, visit our website at calverimmigrationservices.com.